Have you ever been in that situation where they act distant, cold, and emotionally unavailable? But something about their actions tells you they're far more invested than they let on? Here's the truth. Avoidants don't say they're hooked. They show it. And once you know what to look for, their walls won't fool you anymore. You know, one of the biggest mistakes people make when dealing with someone emotionally avoidant is assuming that their consistency, or lack of it, tells the whole story. Avoidants are masters of routine, of building walls so high that no one can climb them. They'll show up in just enough ways to keep the connection alive, but not enough for you to ever feel secure. It's a delicate balancing act for them, because deep down, they're terrified of getting too close. But here's what most people don't realize. When an avoidant starts to break their own pattern, even just slightly, it's not an accident. You'll notice it in the smallest details first. Maybe they've been the type to wait days to respond to a text, but suddenly they reply within hours, or even minutes. Maybe they've always let you do the heavy lifting and planning, but now they're the ones suggesting when and where you should meet. At first, you might tell yourself not to get your hopes up. You think, oh, they're probably just being polite, or maybe they're bored. But this shift isn't random. Avoidants don't do anything by accident when it comes to connection. These little cracks in their consistency are a sign they're thinking about you more than they want to admit. Think about how much effort it takes for someone who's trained themselves to be distant to suddenly break character. That doesn't happen because they're playing a game, or because they're trying to lead you on. It happens because they're starting to lose control of the very thing they've built their identity around. Emotional independence. You'll see it when they send that text late at night just to ask how you're doing. Or when they remember something small you mentioned weeks ago and bring it up out of nowhere. It's as if they're testing the water to see if it's safe to care. But here's the twist. They'll never admit they're doing this. In their mind, they're still telling themselves they're detached, still trying to convince themselves you don't matter that much. But their behavior starts to betray them. And this is where you have to pay attention, not to overanalyze, not to obsess over every little thing they do, but to step back and see the bigger pattern. When someone avoidant starts to show up in ways they never used to, it's because something about you feels different to them. You've gotten under their skin. Now, I'm not saying this means they're ready for a relationship or that you should immediately dive in and assume they've transformed overnight. Far from it. But it does mean they're in unfamiliar territory. It means you've disrupted their default setting. And for an avoidant, that's terrifying and exhilarating all at once. Here's the key. Don't reward inconsistency with overinvestment. When they slip up and show more effort, it's tempting to meet them with even more enthusiasm. To pour yourself into the connection because you finally see them trying. But resist that urge. Let them lean in. Let them feel the weight of their own curiosity about you. Because the moment you overcompensate, they'll retreat back into the comfort of their old patterns. It's not about playing games. It's about balance. You're not here to chase breadcrumbs or to force someone into showing up. You're here to recognize when someone's behavior is shifting and decide whether their actions align with what you deserve. When an avoidant starts texting first, calling to check in, or suggesting plans, they're revealing more than they realize. They're showing you that no matter how much they try to suppress their feelings, the connection they feel is winning, and that's powerful because it means you've stirred something in them they can't fully control. But remember this, you don't need them to confess they're hooked. You don't need them to suddenly become perfect or to flip a switch and act like a securely attached person overnight. You just need to watch. Watch how their consistency starts to slip. Watch how the cracks in their armor reveal the truth they're too scared to say out loud. And most importantly, watch how you respond to those cracks. Because the truth is, Someone can be hooked on you and still not know how to love you the way you deserve. And if you aren't careful, you'll confuse their curiosity for commitment, their effort for emotional availability. So hold your standard. Let them reveal themselves fully before you decide to invest more. The avoidant may not say the words. They may not admit it to you, or even to themselves. But if you pay attention, their actions will say it all. They're hooked, and it's scaring them more than they'll ever let you see. You know what's interesting about someone with an avoidant attachment? They're often the calmest, most collected person in the room until they feel something for you. That's when their perfectly constructed walls start to betray them. You'll notice it in little flashes. It could be in the way their tone changes when they ask you about that friend you were with, or how they suddenly text after a period of silence. Not to say anything profound, but just to make sure you're still there. They'll mask it as casual curiosity, but underneath is a tension they can't quite hide. Avoidants hate feeling out of control. They live their lives trying to avoid dependency, vulnerability, and emotional chaos. But when they're hooked, even if they don't admit it to themselves, you'll see it in moments of emotional outbursts. Not big dramatic scenes. It's more subtle than that. It might be an unexpected snap when you take too long to reply, or an irritated comment when they see you laughing with someone else. They'll try to pull it back, make it seem like it wasn't a big deal, but that split-second flash tells you everything. This isn't about them suddenly turning into a villain. It's about fear. They fear losing something they didn't plan to want this much. You've become important to them, and that terrifies them because it threatens their sense of safety. So they start overcompensating. One moment they're trying to act indifferent, and the next they're letting jealousy seep through. And here's the key. Jealousy isn't always about control. For avoidance, it's often a panic response to realizing their emotions have gotten ahead of them. Think about it. Someone who's truly not invested doesn't care what you're doing or who you're with. They don't get triggered when you're unavailable because to them, there's nothing to lose. But an avoidant who's emotionally hooked is fighting two battles: the pull toward you and the instinct to run from what they feel. So, when they sense you might be slipping away, their fear manifests as irritation, passive, aggressive comments, or even an attempt to reel you back in with sudden affection. This push and pull can leave you confused. You might wonder, why is he acting jealous if he doesn't even want commitment? Why does she get upset when she's the one who keeps me at arm's length? The answer lies in the contradiction of their emotional world. They crave connection but fear the vulnerability that comes with it. They can't admit they're invested because that would mean giving up their sense of independence. Yet their behavior betrays them every time. You might notice them asking questions about your social life, not directly but with a sharpness that wasn't there before. They'll bring up other people in a joking tone, but you can sense the tension behind their words. It's not the behavior of someone who's indifferent. It's the behavior of someone silently panicking because they realize you matter more than they intended. And here's where it gets critical. How you respond in these moments determines everything. If you let their fear-driven outbursts pull you into proving yourself or over-explaining, you'll reinforce the very dynamic they're afraid of. But if you stay calm, centered, and refuse to dance to the tune of their anxiety, you create space for them to recognize their own feelings. You stop feeding the cycle of fear and control, and instead you challenge them to either step up or step out. Avoidance may never say out loud, "I'm hooked." But if you watch closely, their actions speak louder than their words ever could. When jealousy shows up, when their calm exterior cracks, it's not the time to question your worth. It's the moment you realize they're already in deeper than they'd ever admit. And that's the power shift. When you can see past their behavior and understand what's really going on, you stop reacting and start leading. Because the truth is, Someone who's hooked but scared isn't your enemy. They're just not used to feeling this much. But whether or not they rise to meet you, that's on them. You know what's fascinating about someone with an avoidant attachment style? They live by an unspoken rule book, a set of rigid laws they've created for themselves over time. Don't get too close. Don't rely on anyone. Don't let anyone rely on you. Keep your distance because closeness equals pain. And for the most part, they stick to this rule book religiously. It's their safety net. It's how they've protected themselves from getting hurt in the past. But here's what's so telling. When an avoidant is hooked on you, they start breaking their own rules. And not in some big dramatic way. It's subtle. At first, you might not even notice it because they're not about to announce it to the world. But if you pay attention, you'll see the cracks forming in their perfectly constructed walls. Maybe they tell you something about their childhood that they've never shared before. It might seem like a passing comment to you, but for them, that's huge. Vulnerability isn't natural for them. They're used to bottling up their emotions, staying surface level, and keeping conversations safe and light. But when they're emotionally invested, they can't help but let you in, even if it scares the hell out of them. Or maybe they start making small compromises they never would have made before. Perhaps they always insisted on keeping plans last minute because commitment made them feel trapped. Suddenly they're planning something with you a week in advance, or they were adamant about keeping their space and never letting anyone stay over, but now they casually suggest you leave a toothbrush at their place. They may play it off like it's nothing, but trust me, it's not nothing. That's them breaking the rules they've lived by for years. It's not that they've become a different person overnight. This is not some magical transformation where they suddenly shed all their fears and become fully secure. What's really happening is their feelings for you are starting to override their instincts to run. They're torn. One part of them wants to retreat, to go back to the safety of their emotional bunker. But the stronger part, the part that's drawn to you, wants to lean in, to risk connection, even if it terrifies them. And this conflict creates moments where they act out of character. They send you that long, thoughtful text at midnight because they've been thinking about you and can't hold it in anymore. They show up when you least expect it, not because they're obligated to, but because being near you feels like the only thing that makes sense in a world where nothing else feels safe. These are the moments where their walls don't just crack, they start to crumble. And the more you notice it, the more you realize they're hooked in a way they won't admit. Not yet. Because admitting it out loud would mean fully confronting their fear of intimacy. It would mean risking rejection, risking being hurt, and that is their deepest wound. But here's the thing, people don't break their own rules unless something, or someone, matters enough to challenge the beliefs they've held onto for years. When you see them doing things that go against their old patterns, it's not an accident. It's because for the first time in a long time, they're feeling something real. And even if they're not ready to put that into words, their actions are saying everything. You see, the fascinating thing about avoidance is that they'll rarely come out and say, "I care about you." Those words feel far too vulnerable, too risky for someone who's built their life around the idea of self-protection. But if you pay close attention, not to their words, but to their behavior, you'll start to see the truth spilling out in subtle, almost unintentional ways. An avoidant who's hooked doesn't operate like everyone else. They don't show up with grand declarations or constant affection. Instead, they leave a trail of little signs, almost like breadcrumbs, that reveal just how much you've started to matter to them. These are the moments that don't seem like much on the surface, but speak volumes about what's really going on underneath. Maybe it's the way they check in with you when you're unwell. At first glance, it feels casual. "Hey, are you okay? How are you feeling today? But for someone who struggles to even acknowledge emotional closeness, the fact that they're reaching out at all is huge. It's not just polite concern. It's an unconscious way of saying, I can't stop thinking about you right now. I need to know you're all right. Or maybe it's the way they remember tiny details you mentioned weeks ago. Something you said in passing about your stressful meeting at work. Or even you like your calm. Or even the fact that you can't stand a certain song. Avoidants often seem distracted or detached, but when they're emotionally invested, they're paying attention far more than they let on. They store up these details because, deep down, they want to feel connected to you, even if they can't bring themselves to say it outright. And then there are the little acts of service. They might quietly fix something for you without being asked, grab your favorite snack on their way uggling with, or offer them with help you with a problem you've been struggling with. These aren't just random kindnesses. They're a language all their own. For someone who's terrified of being too emotionally exposed, doing things for you is safer than saying, I love being around you. It's their guarded way of stepping closer. But here's where it gets really interesting. An avoidant hooked on you doesn't even realize half the time that these actions are slipping out. Their instinct is to keep their distance, but when emotions run deep, the walls they've built don't hold like they used to. They can't stop themselves from caring, and it leaks out in these small, significant ways. The mistake many people make is dismissing these moments because they're not as obvious as constant texting, affectionate words, or public displays of love. But for an avoidant, these quiet gestures are loud. They mean more than all the flowery language in the world because they're breaking through their own fear to do them. What's even more telling is when you when you have and acknowledge these acts. If you thank them or point it out, they'll often downplay it. Oh, it's nothing. Or don't read too much into it. But the very fact that they're uncomfortable having the spotlight on their care says everything. It's not nothing. It's everything. They just don't know how to handle the vulnerability that comes with admitting it. And the reason this is so powerful is that it reveals where their heart really is. Words can lie. Physical presence can sometimes even lie if someone's good at playing games. But these little acts, they're almost impossible to fake. Someone who doesn't care won't remember the small things. Someone who isn't invested won't go out of their way to make your life easier, even in the tiniest of ways. So when you see these signs, don't ignore them, don't demand more, or push them to say what they can't yet articulate. Instead, observe, appreciate, let them come to their own realization about how deeply they feel for you. Because the truth is, avoidants often need time to reconcile the battle going on inside them, the part that craves connection and the part that's terrified of it. But those small gestures, that's the part of them that's already chosen you, even if they're not ready to say it out loud. And if you can recognize that, you'll understand something most people never do. Love doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. And those whispers, if you listen closely enough, tell you everything you need to know. It's so easy to assume that when someone sends you mixed signals, they're simply not that interested, that if they really wanted you, they'd make it clear, they'd step up, they'd remove all the confusion. And yes, in a healthy, secure relationship, clarity is usually the sign of true commitment. But what if I told you that with avoidant people, these mixed signals don't always mean they don't care? In fact, sometimes it's the exact opposite. You see, when someone has an avoidant attachment style, closeness feels both magnetic and terrifying to them. On the one hand, they crave connection just like anyone else. They're human. They want love, intimacy, the feeling of being fully seen and understood. But on the other hand, that very closeness triggers an old fear. What if I lose myself? What if I get hurt? What if this person leaves me the moment I let my guard down? So, what happens?